Zhang Wei had always considered himself a realist, albeit one with an odd hobby: watching conspiracy theory videos online. It wasn't that he believed every outlandish claim about aliens, government cover UPS, or apocalyptic predictions. No, he just found them entertaining. You know, the kind of thing you watch when you need a distraction from life's mundane grind. A quick way to kill an hour or so when your real job as a freelance philosopher wasn't paying the bills. He was in his cramped Chengdu apartment, sipping on a cup of coffee that had more in common with industrial-grade gasoline than anything you'd find at a cafe, when his phone buzzed with an alarming headline. Squinting at the screen, he read it aloud, more out of a reflexive sense of amusement than any real concern. The world's going to end today. Is Earth about to be invaded? Zhang Wei snorted and took a long sip of his coffee, grimacing at the bitterness. Right, he muttered to no one in particular, another doomsday video. They just can't help themselves. He casually scrolled through his notifications, half listening to the strange, ominous music building in the background of the video, a soundtrack that seemed to scream "end of the world" even more than the actual content. He was about to hit the skip button when something strange happened. His phone started vibrating violently. Zhang Wei jerked back in surprise, watching his screen flash wildly, as if it had become sentient. He reached for it with a mix of disbelief and confusion. "Okay, now this is new," he said, his voice tinged with nervous laughter. Was it a virus? A glitch? Just as he held it in his hands, a sudden tremor rattled through the apartment. It was subtle at first, like a passing truck vibrating the walls. But then the shaking intensified. The ground beneath him rumbled, and the walls creaked, groaning like the old building was about to collapse. Zhang Wei stood up, his heart pounding. He looked out the window, and a wave of sheer disbelief washed over him. A thick cloud of smoke and ash was rising from the distant mountains, blotting out the sky. His mouth went dry.no. That wasn't possible. That volcano had been dormant for centuries. He had read about it in his online articles, back when he'd been obsessively researching climate change. There were no signs of any imminent eruption. But there it was. The tremors grew stronger, and the sound of an explosive roar filled the air. He rushed to the window, his heart racing. It felt as though the world itself was shaking in fury. But the eruption wasn't the only thing happening. The breeze outside? It was getting stronger. Too strong. Like someone had cranked up the volume on nature's speaker system. The air outside felt alive, charged. Zhang Wei wasn't the superstitious type, but something told him this wasn't just some freak natural event. As if on cue, a voice, deep and rumbling, echoed in his mind. Zhang Wei. He froze, heart skipping a beat. He whipped around, expecting to see someone standing in his apartment, his mind racing through a dozen ridiculous explanations. But no one was there. "Hello?" he called, his voice shaky. He reached for the door, thinking maybe someone was pulling some kind of elaborate prank on him. But before he could open it, the voice spoke again, this time louder, more insistent. "Zhang Wei. It is time for you to awaken." The words felt like they reverberated not just in his ears but deep in his chest, resonating with something primal inside him. Zhang Wei stepped back, his knees feeling weak. He wasn't sure if he was going crazy, but the air itself seemed to vibrate, responding to the voice. It was like every molecule around him was aware of him, watching him. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered, backing away from the walls. The voice continued, like a gentle, ancient whisper carried by the wind. "I am the earth. And I have chosen you, Zhang Wei." Zhang Wei stared at the walls, the floors, the ceiling. Every surface of the room seemed alive. His eyes darted from the floor to the windowsill, where the plants in his tiny apartment sat, unmoving, as they always had. And yet now, they seemed to sway imperceptibly, as though responding to the call of something he couldn't understand. "You will help protect me from a threat far greater than anything humanity has faced." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Zhang Wei wondered if it had all been some kind of elaborate dream. But then the shaking in the walls intensified, and his apartment was filled with a sudden, blinding flash of light that he gasped and fell to his knees. His head swam with confusion, but there was one undeniable truth: the Earth, the very Earth, was speaking to him. And it wasn't asking. It was commanding. "The invaders come from the stars," the voice boomed, and Zhang Wei felt the weight of it settle on his chest like a massive, invisible hand. "You are my chosen emissary. You must stop them. I will teach you. You will learn to speak to my elements: fire, water, air, and earth. You are my voice, my champion. Will you accept your fate?" Zhang Wei felt the ground beneath him vibrate again, as though the earth itself was waiting for an answer. For a moment, he just sat there, paralyzed. This was insane. Was he dreaming? Had the coffee gone to his head? This couldn't be happening, but then a strange, almost instinctual sensation tugged at him. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was a sense of purpose, something greater than anything he had ever felt before. The voice wasn't threatening. It wasn't malevolent. It was urgent. "Okay," he whispered, not fully understanding what was going on but feeling something deeper stir within him. "Okay. I'll do it. I'll help." There was no dramatic flash of light. No fanfare. But suddenly, it was as though he had crossed some invisible threshold. He could feel the air around him change, the currents of the wind flowing into his body, filling his lungs, filling his mind with a strange awareness. "Good," the Earth's voice replied. "You must learn quickly, Zhang Wei. The balance of the world is fragile. Time is running out." Zhang Wei was still trying to process what had just happened when another, more urgent rumble shook the ground beneath his feet. He looked outside again, and this time, he saw the source of the eruption more clearly. Above the skyline, the sky seemed to pulse with an eerie, unnatural glow. Something was coming. And whatever it wasn't from this planet. The volcano continued to erupt, the smoke now dark and thick, as though it were trying to block out the sun itself. But Zhang Wei barely noticed. He was too focused on the incredible weight of what had just happened: the Earth, the elements, the alien invasion. He could hear the Earth whispering again, its voice now more insistent: "You must hurry. Find the source of the threat. Protect the balance. And remember, speak to the elements. Listen to them. They are with you." Zhang Wei didn't know where to start. He didn't know how he could fight an alien invasion with a volcano, a river, and a few rocks. But as he looked out the window, he knew one thing: this was no longer about him. This was about the Earth itself, and somehow, whether he was ready or not, he had become its messenger. The elements were waiting. And so was the planet. Zhang Wei stumbled into the hallway, his mind a swirling storm of disbelief. Every footstep echoed in the quiet apartment building, and for a brief moment, he wondered if this was just some elaborate prank, someone in the building messing with his head. But as the ground beneath his feet trembled again, that thought was swept away. Okay. Earth's talking to me. The Earth itself. He muttered under his breath, hands gripping the railing as he descended the stairs. Aliens are invading. And I'm, what? Supposed to save the planet? His thoughts were chaotic, but the more he thought about it, the more real it felt. The air around him felt different now, charged with a strange energy, as if the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something. He tried to shake off the feeling, but there was no escaping it. The moment he stepped outside, the full weight of the situation slammed into him. The sky was a strange, unnatural shade of purple, the clouds swirling like they were being dragged by invisible hands. Above him, the air crackled with static. The usual bustling noises of Chengdu honking cars, chatter, the sounds of city life seemed to fade into a hollow silence. And then, there was the eruption. The volcano, once dormant for centuries, was alive. Massive plumes of smoke and ash billowed into the sky, blotting out the sun. The ground trembled again, more violently this time. Zhang Wei stumbled, nearly losing his balance, but it wasn't the volcano that froze him in place. It was the AIGirl was alive. Zhang Wei's breathing became shallow as the breeze, at first gentle, picked up, swirling around him, carrying whispers he couldn't quite understand. The voice of the earth, soft and persistent, seemed to guide him. He heard it, even though it wasn't a sound, more of a feeling, a presence that filled the space around him. Follow the river, the earth spoke, the voice deep, resonating within his chest. The water will guide you. The river? Zhang Wei mumbled. He knew where the river was, of course. The Jinjiang River ran right through the heart of Chengdu. But what could it possibly have to do with this? Why did the earth want him to follow it? He didn't have time to wonder. His feet moved on their own, almost as though something within him, something ancient, was urging him forward. He glanced up, catching the shimmer of light reflecting off the surface of the river, which now looked different. The water was too still, too quiet, as if waiting for something. The wind, carrying with it the strange, lingering whispers, began to pick up again. A sudden gust blew so strongly that Zhang Wei had to brace himself against a lamppost. The air seemed to speak, almost in a teasing manner, as though it was pleased with his compliance. All right, Zhang Wei muttered, setting off toward the river. There was no other choice. He couldn't ignore the earth now. The elements were all around him, and for better or worse, they had chosen him. The closer he got to the river, the stranger everything felt. The air was thick with anticipation, the smell of ash mingling with the fresh scent of water. He could hear the faintest sound now, the sound of the river talking, murmuring something he couldn't fully grasp. His feet splashed through the shallow edges, but instead of the usual sluggish pull of the water, it felt as though the river was pushing him forward, guiding him toward some unseen goal. The gentle flow of the water was oddly insistent, urging him onward. Zhang Wei turned his eyes to the water, trying to make sense of the situation. It's time, the earth whispered again, a little sharper this time. You must be ready. The invaders are already here. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Invaders? What did the earth mean? Was it talking about the eruption? Or was something else coming? The sky overhead shifted again, darkening, as if the clouds themselves were gathering forces, thickening into a storm. He stood there, at the river's edge, wondering what to do next when a low, ominous rumble echoed from above. His first instinct was to run, but he couldn't. Someone was watching. Something alien that he didn't have to wait long. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw an enormous shadow moving across the sky, its shape unlike anything he had ever seen. It was too large to be a normal aircraft, and there was no sound, only a shiver of energy in the air. He felt the earth respond, almost like a warning. He was no longer alone. The alien craft hovered over the city, its sleek, silver surface gleaming under the clouds. For a moment, it looked as if time had frozen. People were still on the streets, but they were frozen in place, unaware of the arrival. But Zhang Wei, he knew. He could feel the shift in the atmosphere, a disturbance in the natural flow of the world. The voice of the earth suddenly boomed in his mind. Zorith is here. He is the leader of the invaders. His power comes from manipulating the balance of the elements. He seeks to conquer this world. Zorith? Zhang Wei repeated, struggling to keep his voice steady. Who is he? What does he want with Earth? He is a tyrant, the Earth's voice rumbled. He comes to enslave the world, to strip its resources, to destroy its harmony. But you will stop him. You must. Zhang Wei's mind raced. Zorith. Tyrant. The world. Earth was talking to him like he was some kind of hero. He didn't know the first thing about fighting an alien invader. He was just a guy who liked to debate philosophy in his free time, someone who barely managed to pay rent each month. But right now, Earth was asking him no, telling him to save the world. The craft loomed larger above him, a massive presence in the sky. And then, as though sensing Zhang Wei's confusion, the Earth responded, shifting in tone, "You are my chosen one. You will speak to the elements, call upon their power, and stand against Zoritha's forces." You are not alone. Fire, water, air, and earth, they will help you. They will guide you. But you must act now. Without thinking, Zhang Wei raised his hands, his palms facing the ground. It was a reflex, a response to the overwhelming weight of the moment. He didn't know what to expect. A gust of wind? A trickle of water? Fire? And then, as if the earth itself had been waiting for this exact moment, the ground beneath him rumbled, the earth spoke to him. It wasn't just a tremor or the usual shifting of tectonic plates. It was a voice that surged through the soil, the rocks, the very core of the planet. I will give you strength. He felt it then, an energy flooding his body, like a force of nature, like the raw power of the earth itself was rushing through his veins. The ground beneath him quivered, and the air thickened with anticipation. For the first time in his life, Zhang Wei could hear it. He could understand it. The language of the earth, the fire, the water, and the air. All around him, the elements were awake. They were alive. And they were speaking to him. A loud crack echoed from above as the alien ship descended, sending a shockwave through the streets. But it wasn't just the ship. It was the earth fighting back, its power manifesting in ways Zhang Wei could only begin to comprehend. The volcano continued its eruption in the distance, the river churned violently, and the wind howled with fury. Zhang Wei raised his arms, and the world seemed to answer. He could feel the fire, the earth, the air, and the water, each element responding to his command. He wasn't sure how he knew what to do, but somehow, the earth had taught him. The power of the elements was now his to wield, and he would need it. The alien ship, Zoratha's vessel, hovered above the city. The sky crackled with energy as the craft prepared to unleash its destructive force on the planet. But Zhang Wei didn't flinch. He wasn't some helpless bystander anymore. The earth was speaking through him now, and he had no choice but to listen. The alien craft hung in the sky, an ominous shadow blotting out what little sunlight was left. The city below was eerily still, the streets empty, as if everyone had instinctively known something terrible was about to happen. Yet, amidst the silence, Zhang Wei stood, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath his feet, his hands raised to the heavens. The air around him vibrated with energy. The elements were alive, waiting for him to call on them. Zoratha's ship flickered with a sickly light, and a low hum emanated from it, a sound like a mechanical growl. The craft slowly descended, like a predator circling its prey. But Zhang Wei wasn't afraid, not anymore. He could feel the earth, the fire, the water, the air, all surging within him, calling to him, urging him to act. You have the power now. The earth's voice resonated within his mind, deep and steady. The elements are yours to command. But you must strike quickly. Zoratha's forces are here. Zhang Wei's gaze shifted upward as he focused on the ship. He could see the glimmering outline of its massive form, but he didn't feel helpless. He didn't feel small. It was like everything around him had shifted, like he was no longer just a man on the street, wondering what to do next. Now, he was something more. The wind picked up, swirling around him, tugging at his clothes. Zhang Wei felt it as though it was a part of him, guiding him, urging him to act. He wasn't sure how or why, but it felt right. The air hummed with potential, and he understood, somehow, that he could use it, manipulate it. He stretched out his hand toward the sky, the wind responding instantly. It spiraled, picking up force as if it were a living thing, bending to his will. The air whipped around him, faster and faster, until it was a cyclone, a force of nature that tore through the streets, scattering debris, uprooting trees. The wind howled, a deafening roar, as it headed straight for the descending ship. Stop him, the earth's voice urged. Zoratha's ship is shielded, but the wind can strip it of its protection. You must weaken his defenses. Zhang Wei clenched his fists, his heart pounding. He didn't know how he knew what to do. It was as if the elements had been waiting for him to act, teaching him their language. The wind surged forward, slamming into the ship with a force so powerful that it rocked the massive vessel, sending it spiraling out of control. the ship's outer shield flickered, momentarily weakening. Zhang Wei could feel the satisfaction of the earth underfoot, the shared triumph of nature pushing back against this invader. But it wasn't over. Zorath wasn't going to give up that easily. The craft corrected itself, leveling out in the air once again, but it had been rattled, its defense system scrambling. And then, for the first time, Zhang Wei saw Zorath, the alien, stepped out from the hatch of the ship, a tall, imposing figure cloaked in metallic armor, his face hidden behind a reflective visor. His movements were fluid and controlled, but there was an air of arrogance to him, as though he were certain of his superiority. He looked down at Zhang Wei, and even from this distance, Zhang Wei could feel the cold disdain emanating from the alien. It was as if Zorath was already preparing to crush him, to extinguish whatever defiance he represented. "You think you can stop me, human?" Zorath's voice boomed, carried by some unseen force. It wasn't coming from a speaker, it was in his mind, as if the alien was speaking directly into his consciousness. Zhang Wei's knees buckled under the pressure, the weight of Zorath's voice pressing down on him, trying to invade his thoughts, to bend him to his will. But he fought back, standing firm. "I'm not alone," Zhang Wei said, his voice stronger than he felt. "I have the earth with me." The wind howled around him, growing stronger, bending to his will. But that wasn't all. Beneath his feet, the ground trembled, and the very earth itself seemed to rise, the ground splitting and shifting as if alive. Rocks and soil surged upward, creating walls of stone that shielded Zhang Wei, wrapping around him like a protective cocoon. The elements were responding, every one of them, in sync, a force that couldn't be denied. Zorath's gaze sharpened, the alien's disdain turning into something darker, more menacing. He raised his hand, and Zhang Wei could see energy crackling between his fingers. The ship above him hummed, and then without warning Zorath unleashed a beam of pure destructive force. The beam tore through the air, cutting a swath through the city streets, heading straight for Zhang Wei. The ground beneath his feet cracked, and the earth buckled, but Zhang Wei didn't move. The fire was already inside him. The wind had answered his call. The earth had become his shield. And now he called on the water. A sudden roar erupted from the river behind him. The Jinjiang River, which had been churning calmly only moments before, now surged upward like a massive tidal wave, sweeping forward with unrelenting force. It rose high into the air, a wall of water that crashed into the beam of destructive energy with a deafening clash. The water hit the beam with incredible force, splintering the energy as if it were nothing more than a fragile thread. Zorath's attack faltered, and for a brief moment, Zhang Wei saw fear flicker in the alien's eyes, but there was no time to waste. The ship was still descending, its weapons recharging. The wind began to stir again, swirling around Zhang Wei, pushing him forward, into the path of the invader's craft. He felt the energy of the earth beneath his feet, the power of the water, the fire that surged in the distance, and the wind that carried his every movement. With a roar, Zhang Wei extended his arms, directing the elements all at once. The wind and water combined, spiraling together into a colossal vortex that surrounded Zorath's ship. The earth trembled beneath him as the ground shifted and cracked, sending massive stones soaring into the sky. The fire, distant but ever-present, sparked in the form of brilliant, jagged lightning strikes that cracked through the clouds above. Zorath's ship was engulfed in the storm of elements, battered by rocks, water, and flame. The alien's shields flickered, weakened by the force of the elements. But it wasn't just the ship that was under attack. Zorath himself was being forced back, his energy draining, as though the planet itself had reached out and grabbed hold of him. "No." Zorath's voice thundered, desperate. "You cannot defeat me." "I'm not here to defeat you, Zorath," Zhang Wei said, his voice steady now. "I'm here to protect the earth." The vortex intensified, the elements growing stronger under Zhang Wei's control. The wind howled with fury, the water surged higher, and the ground cracked, sending cracks of energy through the alien's ship. It wasn't just a battle of power. It was a battle of wills. Zorath's ship shook violently as the elements tore into it, the air thick with energy and chaos. And then, just as quickly as it had all begun, the ship faltered, its shields collapsing under the combined weight of the Earth's forces. With a deafening screech, the vessel plummeted toward the ground, crashing into the river with an explosive impact. Water exploded outward, flooding the streets, but the ship was no more. Zhang Wei stood amidst the wreckage, breathing heavily. The elements had done what he could not have hoped to accomplish alone. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't even sure how he'd managed to do what he had. But the Earth had spoken to him. The elements had listened. As the dust began to settle and the remnants of the destroyed ship smoked in the distance, Zhang Wei looked up at the sky, the storm dissipating, leaving behind a quiet calm. "You did it," the Earth's voice said, a note of approval in its tone. "You have restored balance." Zhang Wei didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was certain: he was no longer the same person who had woken up that morning, unsure of his place in the world. He had become something else. He had become the voice of the Earth, its champion in a battle that stretched across time and space, and the Earth had a lot more to teach him.